Good evening, everybody. I'm Kenny Grand with the Arkansas Progressive Democrats Caucus, along with Shanoa Summers and Ryan Giglio over here on the other side of the screen. This is our first ever live stream, so we're pretty excited about it. We're hoping that this can be a regular outlet for like news, movement information, and like world news and beyond. This one's a live stream, so it is participatory. There will be time for question and answer. Any of the opinions stated during this program are the opinions of the individuals and don't reflect the official opinions or stances of the Arkansas Progressive Democrats Caucus or the Arkansas Democratic Party or any other entity. That being said, welcome to the show. I'm the co-chair of the organization. This podcast and live stream is called Southern Shift. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ryan Giglio, if you'd like to introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about how you got into this. And I'm going to chase these dogs out.
Hello, I'm Ryan Giglio. Currently sick, so I'm going to try my best to be good. I started this organization with Kenneth coming out of the Green Party. It became progressively harder for the Green Party to function as an entity here in the state of Arkansas. And it eventually got to the point where we could no longer be a party. So me and Kenneth got together with a couple other folks and decided to just go and bring about the good progressive word to the folks that don't often get talked to. And that's what we're here doing today. So, Shanoa?
Yeah, I'm Shanoa Summers. I'm from Jonesboro, representing NEA, and I'm also a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. I got involved when I was actually running a campaign last year. I ran for state senate, and I just kind of jumped in with Kenny and Ryan. It was like summer of last year, and I've been there ever since. They can't get rid of me.
So yeah, and we've come a good long way. We've got this quarterly that we're actually going to be reading a lot from was the 5th. And so that's pretty nice. We're going on a year and a half of existence. I think we're a few months in before we came out with our first periodical. And there's our website. Could y'all pop that on the little bottom thing? If you go to our website, you can get links to all of our quarterlies. We're going to kind of use this one as a guide to describe what we've set up. So for the first year, we kind of mainly had the conversations that needed to be had. The caucus is a formation of like third-party organizers, people who haven't done party politics, who've done labor organizing or community organizing or cultural organizing. But we just realized that we needed to make more space at the table for real representation in politics. And real representation in democratic politics, because like after the early 2000s and like the decline of the party in Arkansas, and then after COVID completely decimated things for people just to like be in public together, we're starting from scratch. And so it just made sense for us to like join forces, and we built a caucus within the Democratic Party. And we spent the past year kind of making relationships with people, building relationships with county chapters, and building relationships with candidates and setting up programs. And then we just really over the summer, the Capes Coalition formed. A lot of people put a lot of their effort into fighting the LEARNS Act. And so we had a little bit of a respite as an organization. But we came back together this past summer and started to have conversations about what we really needed the most out of like a progressive political organization that was party affiliated, because the importance of having like the electoral and the cultural and social aspect and popular education aspect is that like it's the only way you can build a substantive power base. Anyway, if we want, I guess we can just go through. We've got about 7 working groups, and we have meetings for each working group or check-ins every weekday. Tuesdays and Fridays are our busy days. And then the rest of the times we just have one like 30-minute to an hour long working group. But I'll probably, the first one is mutual aid. So I'll put Chanel on the spot, I guess, to intro that, but we'll also chime in.
Yeah. So let me make sure I get the time and date right on it. But the mutual aid working group looks like it meets Mondays at 5 p.m. So what we do is discuss how we can help our community. Most notably, right now, here in Craighead County, Lake City is really facing some tough times with food insecurity. So we are doing a food drive for the pantry that's there in Lake City. Are there any other events going on right now with mutual aid?
Not as far as that. We've been contacting local masjids and Muslim communities about just support, because they're going through a hell of a time right now. And we've also considered reaching out to other food aid organizations, because like there's a few groups like Potluck Food Rescue here in Little Rock who have done partnerships with other civic organizations to do like USDA contracts where we could go in and do cooking and food education and have a free market set up in like housing developments like we did this before with COVID. And we briefly mentioned this in the last meeting, but we haven't done any forward action on it. But yeah, the mutual aid group overall, I think we've been concentrating also on identifying mutual aid organizations around the state that are already doing stuff, because the point is about building relationships of solidarity and mutuality. And so we've been, I see over here about, yeah, mutual aid Mondays at 5 p.m. That's the meeting. NWA does free meals consistently in Northwest Arkansas, William says. Also, hey, what's up? I believe that William's actually going to be running for JP as well. So you'll be seeing that name a little bit more. But yeah, and there's other stuff that we've considered with it. These are all fledgling groups, and some are like kind of working elements within other groups, and some are standalones. And so this is one that we've really just gotten started. Let's see, what's this? What would be Tuesdays is one of the big work days. And that's the media working group, and that's part of this. Like this is a production with about, how many people do we have on here right now? 5 people. We've got between 5 and 7 people planning the podcast. And we hope to have like shifting content from time to time, like have different subjects and have shifting hosts. So we'll be the first 3 hosts, but any other member of the caucus like can kind of host and lead on it. And so our next one will be in a couple weeks, and we'll have a new panel, possibly some guest speakers. So that we do that with media. We do the quarterly with media. Right now, we're also kind of the candidates who need help with editing, with press releases and stuff like that. That's something that we've been trying to help out with, just because we've got a pool of people who like helping to edit stuff, and they're fairly good at it. And so we're working on that, and maybe that'll continue on into other things like helping in, like with the policy writing, which we'll get to as well with candidates. But yeah, and then we're wanting to build a solid media presence. We're wanting to bring in content producers to do podcasts to help with the publication and the website. That's a pretty busy one. And then electoral is also on Tuesdays now. We've had a shift around. And Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about the electoral work we've done on?
Yeah, so with the electoral working group, we do a lot of identifying districts here in the state of Arkansas, both state level, JP, and even more local. And we identify previous election totals to see kind of where they're at right now, kind of building out little plans for each district and each contest. And we also I go around and identify candidates who have either declared or who we want to declare. And we work with them to see what they need, what they want, and kind of get them to a level where they feel confident in running in their election. So far, we've done a lot of collaborative work with the electoral working group and the event planning working group, um, and the legislative working group, which we'll go over in a second. And yeah, I believe so far we've contacted somewhere around 23, 24 candidates in total. And I know Chenoa and them up north have a couple more. And yeah, it's a really fun working group, I think.
Yeah,
But
we build resources like within it too. So we've got like a little toolbox that we've got that has organizations that help out, like Outrun, who like helps find financing, and other state organizations. We share all the other candidate handbooks and stuff, and offer advice around like fundraising and stuff like that, and kind of teach people how to research campaign finance fundraising so they can set reasonable targets. We'll go in and get their win numbers, and we'll like figure out what it'll take and whether it's feasible. A lot of these races aren't necessarily going to win. We just want to see capacity build up. And like Shanoa's, for example, like outperformed anybody's expectation, against Dan Sullivan, who unfortunately is wreaking havoc on the library systems and is going to be a big agent for austerity in the next legislative session, but we hope to be getting rid of the turkey. So there's a lot of stuff that we do within electoral, and then it does overlap with the other working groups, so I'll shush on some of it. What's the next one that we should cover?
well, I also wanted to bring up that we have been working on a tool that we're calling the Bearcat, and it's pretty exciting. If Kenneth on here is the one that developed a lot of it with some collaborative work with a bunch of other folks. If you want to talk about it a little more.
Yeah. So one of the problems that I've had as an organizer who hasn't had a lot of resources or institutional support is that access to voters and voter access networks is sometimes stodgy. Most of the time, like I was one of the beta testers for the VAN network in like 2006, 2007 when it was first developing. Before it like even opened up to anything outside of like Democratic Party operatives and beta testers and out to ACO and then other partisan organizations and stuff. It became a more formal thing. But anyway, so we realized that the voter record is free and available and it updates. And so tried to figure out a way to like, when we're currently working on a way to like interlay voter information and walkable maps for canvassers. So if you're a candidate or you're a canvasser on a team to go phone bank or make calls, you'll be able to go out and know who you're talking to. In our field tests, it's pretty accurate, like up to like, I don't know, what, Ryan, do you think, about 70% accurate on the doors?
The candidates we've sent it to have said that it's like 90% accurate.
Usually somebody's passed away since the last election or have like recently moved or sold their house. And it's a big undertaking, but also it's just a tool that we can like leverage now. We can give free like small kits to anybody who's running for office, just so you can have something to do for targeting. And then we can figure out like other arrangements. Like we've got a JP candidate in Saline County who we're going to build out the thing because she wants to help build out and extract the whole thing, and it takes labor. If she's helping with that, then we're not going to charge her, of course, to use it. But that's something that's cool because it can be an asset shared with all Democratic Party organizers and affiliated organizations. It can work in conjunction with the VAN system, but the thing with it is like all the data that we get stays with us in perpetuity. So we don't have to worry about like paying the whatever, couple $1,000s or whatever it costs to keep it up every year. So that's interesting. We're down to find beta testers. I'm way too excited about it. So just if you're running for office, just like tug on my sleeve and ask for a map, because I really like building maps. It's really kind of cool because you can like drop people in Google Street View and like scout out the areas to make sure that they're safe, or that it's like kind of like what kind of targeted demographic you want to talk to. And that could mean many things, like even like one of our biggest ones that we worked on here in Northside was highly working class and really, really responsive at the doors. And that was kind of cool to kind of go in there and verify it and see it. But yeah, hell yeah, Cat. It is the most updated, almost, until we do another extraction. Yes, William, DM me and I will get you your darn map. And yours is small enough. It's a JP district. I'll see if I can find enough people to help extract the whole county, but I can probably just chuck you that for a JP. But we can at least get you a partial map that'll be like 40 to 60% of voters. So, all right. So is there anything else to cover, or should we move on to the next giant pile of functions?
I believe we're moving on to event planning working committee.
All right, event planning. So that's one of the supporting working groups, and we are probably going to like really push to bring more people from the other working groups into the event planning group, just because it is so intensive. We've got a couple events coming up, and Shanoa, you're probably you were going to do the facilitation on this one, but we ended up canceling because we didn't want to like talk until we had no voices this evening. But and so like the event planning group is who we go to. So the media group, I didn't bring this up, but like, so say you have like a press release you want to have looked at, they'll do that. Hey, Natalie. Or like if you want to like or if you've got a speech or something like that. Sorry, I saw Natalie saying hi and my brain just totally went. But pretty much like if you've got a graphic, a poster, something you need looked at, or something within the caucus, like if the fundraising group wants a table topper, we'll send that on to media. And so the same thing is the thing with the events working group. We've currently got 2 events, and so with each event, there's a different working group working with it. So we've got an event upcoming in, where's it at in Springdale, Ryan?
Yeah, the Springdale Library.
Yeah. And then we've got another one going on in Jonesboro, the week after, approximately. Do y'all have details on those 2 that I don't have on me? Or could somebody?
Yeah, I think the one in Jonesboro, at least, is November 21st. It will be at the Crickhead Forest Pavilion. I can't remember off the top of my head which pavilion, but I think we settled on 4 to 7. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
4 to 7 p.m. It's going to be a barbecue, maybe candlelight. So.
So yeah, 7.
Yeah, so it'll be 4 to 7, and then the one in Springdale will be this coming weekend, and you can, Forest Park Pavilion number 3, and so that's with the fundraising working group, and we're suggesting a donation of $13. If you don't have $13 to get like all the food you want, you can just get the food, and kids eat free as well. So it's mainly just to get out and fellowship and have fun. It was kind of funny because when they were applying, like we were getting like not major blowback, but like the city was like, well, what are you actually doing? Like, what kind of group are you? And we were like, well, we're progressive Democrats. And they were like, well, what actually are you doing? And we're like, we're cooking and eating food. Like, that's it. So there won't even be any speeches. And you can donate on the QR, and we will pop that up here in a little bit also. And we'll send out links in all the social media, and I'll try and come through afterwards to the Facebook or wherever this is streaming. What are the Springdale details?
That's going to be at 1 p.m. this Sunday over at the Springdale Library. I believe our member Cassandra has gotten us a pretty decent sized room at that library.
And we've got some labor campaign work going, which we've got another working group we'll get to in the area. And we also are working on a potential legislative campaign there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit. I think we're making pretty good time. It's only 20 minutes, but
I just rechecked my notes, and it is 1:45.
1:45. And I don't know if we're bringing food, so y'all might need to bring your own snacks, buddies.
No food at this one.
This one's all business, but really it's to go out to Northwest Arkansas and spend quality time just kind of seeing, what people's needs are, what the biggest issues are there. Like half of the work that we do when we're doing field work is just kind of seeing what people's real needs are, because that's how you build a party that is responsive to the people. And actually, the Democratic Party of Arkansas, I should say, couple of years, for every critique that we might have, has been doing better at that. So that's the events. We want to set up fundraisers. We set up a thing in Jonesboro in the past, town halls. We can help facilitate and set up debates. We can help facilitate discussions. There's a group of parents in Cabot who are having trouble dealing with there's actually there's a suicide rate, but there's actually a high suicide rate amongst queer children there. And we're not going to be on the front and go big into the media about it, but we'll kind of help facilitate those discussions so they can at least be more equipped to take grievances to the school, and just sort of leveraging our strength and our political capital that we go as we go along, because that's the responsibility of a party, is to leverage whatever it has when its people needs it. And that's what the events group does too. Help set up support events, help set up fundraising events, and helps people with their events. Like I said, we can facilitate. We can help with targeting, stuff like that. So what would be the next working group?
Next working group is the legislative working group. I have a personal interest in this one because out of all of the working groups, I feel like this one is one of the most important ones as far as electoral politics goes. What we've been doing in this working group is developing just straight legislation for candidates to use, for them to run campaigns on, and for them to develop ideas. So far, we have 8 bills written. One of our most popular ones is the Food Desert Act. I think one of our producers could find that and post it sometime. But we also develop not just legislation, but platforms in conjunction with the electoral working group, so that candidates know how to run on those and develop just a lot of strategies based off those legislations that we develop. So we also, during legislative sessions, really dig in deep. We try to find those bills that get put up in the session as early as possible, so that we can craft language around it and put out our caucus's opinion on those bills that are getting pushed into session as early as possible, and start rallying folks around what is going on. This late session, what was that?
On the tactical side of this, there are so many foundations that pay so many people to sit full time at their desk to do what we're doing now, that like really not that many people are doing in politics, which is writing policy recommendations and doing draft legislation. And one of the main reasons we started this, like we weren't doing draft legislation when we started it, we were doing the research, and we're going to continue that, because if we could go in and identify the most damaging and unconstitutional bills before they're put out, and we can start kind of alerting the networks and framing the narrative before it hits the media, then we get an upper hand, even if we're just fighting from our backs. Sorry, that was just something I have remembered about.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that we don't get a lot of folks in the working group, but the people that are there are very determined at crafting things for use.
We've got several pieces of legislation. One of the reasons we're going up to Springdale is because we've got a couple people interested in doing a voter initiative to re-enfranchise former felons who've completed all their necessary requirements. And we did a meeting over it this last week, and we've talked about it in the past for that. And we've kind of found that there's just ways we could help streamline processes to where we don't have to do sweeping reforms. Some of the bills also that we write like are pretty damn bipartisan. Like hopefully we'll work on a good ag bill. We're working on others that he can bring up in a second as well. But the other thing with that is like the voter enfranchisement for felons bill, we can run it in Washington County as a county initiative, but then also people who are JPs in other districts can introduce it in their quorum courts, as well as library funding bills. I mean, we're going to need library infrastructure and development bills for now Saline and Craighead counties because of the austerity measures. And so that's one of the purposes of the group, is to kind of at least get the base language and the base legislation that elected officials could adopt. And like some of these, it's like we're going to be like pretty like, you know, we're going to be pretty adamant on them, you know, like with the Food Desert Act and stuff like that. But yeah, and if you want to bring up the Food Desert Act.
Well, we're still working out the finer details of it. All I can really say is that the candidates that have looked at it have really loved it. One of them is actually running on it, Amy Grant over in Russellville. And I think that one has the most potential as of right now.
And essentially what it would do is it's a statewide adaptation of a national bill that was already put forth in the Senate or in the House. I forgot which chamber, but essentially it provides for dispensations to build like local or small owned grocery and produce infrastructure in areas that are considered food deserts. And we're working out like the language and getting the apportionment stuff and stuff like that ironed out. But we do have a working draft. And the point of the legislative working group is to kind of get candidates to come in and learn how to draft legislation, to practice and learn how to draft legislation ourselves. So to craft stuff to put out. And it's where we can take the needs that we identify in the communities and sit down and figure out workable solutions and at least have something to bring to the table. What I was getting to with adamant, and I blanked out, is like if there's something that like the Democrats don't want to pick up, we will go to like independents or dang Republicans, you know, and say, here, you take this dang grocery bill.
All right. So with that said, we'll move on to the labor working group, and you guys know a little bit more about what's going on there.
Okay, the labor working group is, we're like, and so in a lot of these, we're building resources. Like the legislative working group, we're starting to build a resource base and build base legislation. And like in the electoral working group, we're building electoral resources, whether that is voter information databases and walkable maps, whether that's like filing information or getting people set up with organizations. With the labor working group, it's about how to re-enfranchise the labor movement. Essentially, it's got two prongs. This is one of our things that's sort of like the mutual aid working group, right? Like we want to not only like help enact legislation that's good for workers and study real progressive legislative laws and stuff like that, but like also give workers the tools they need to like organize democratically in their own workplaces. And so right now we're working on a workplace organizing guide in the labor working group that is being written from guidebooks and from trainings from other national organizations, some of which our organizers are either part of or have been part of. So the idea is to help meet those needs, you know, because that's what you're supposed to do, is find ways to meet those needs. And sometimes that's through appropriations, sometimes that's through education and teaching people how to self-advocate. So that's what the labor working group is. We are currently helping out with one labor drive. There's others that we're looking for. There's other stuff in other working groups that need to do stuff around this working group. Like there's been a unconstitutional bill that's passed, like that essentially tells employers to fire employees if they engage in collective bargaining, which is like a violation of the U.S. Constitution. But yeah, and so we're teaching people how to advocate and how to organize, how to shop for the unions, but also how to do the organization. The union is the people. It's the people in the workplace. And it's all based on relationship building and understanding, you know, sort of how big the group is that you're dealing with, like what's the size of your organizing cohort, like how many people do you need to get a union victory, and also doing like lots of like legislative lobbying and stuff like that. I see William say, let's see, Josh says it's a great thing about the caucus is that we absolutely will work with Republicans where we agree with them without compromising our progressive values. Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen that in the past, like Shanoa, like I know that there were some good people, a few people in NEA that were like working across the aisle around the Learns Act. And then William, the labor working group, they're doing a Red Cup Rebellion event, 1116 North Bentonville Starbucks. So the Red Cup Rebellion events are their public community outreach. So any organizations or people are encouraged to go out and support the workers. He might be able to put in there, I don't know where they are in their labor drive, but I think that they won their election. So they're trying to arbitrate what their contract is going to be. And Starbucks has been really, where can you donate for the labor working group or for the Red Cup Rebellion thing? Because I think that if you go to Starbucks Workers United, you can donate to the strike fund. But if you go to our website, you can get a link to our Act Blue to donate to us if that's what you're talking about. Yeah, right there. So that QR right there. And if you can also go to ourprogressivedems.taplink.ws, but ourprogressivedems.com will get you there. Is it .com or .org? .org. Sorry, got a lot of websites. But yeah, the last Red Cup rebellions were really effective, and the participation in them were so heavy that they were originally just going to target like 5 urban Starbucks stores, and they ended up reaching out to other people. That movement's really strong, but Starbucks has been like really, really obstinate. And if you go in and read that quarterly, we've actually got an article on a new National Labor Relations Board ruling on CMEX that kind of was a snapback at businesses trying to like prey on workers trying to organize. But anyway, that's it for that one, I believe. But yeah, labor working group. It's the first one on Friday. It's at 3:00, 3:00 in the afternoon. Eventually we'll
Labor's at 5, legislatives at 3.
Oh, legislatives at 3 on Friday?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. Then, is that all of them?
Yep, that's it. It's
okay, so that
makes us a pretty busy caucus.
We're really busy, but one of the things that we've been able to do, because we've kind of portioned it out into working groups, is work towards making it a more leaderful organization. And now, essentially we've got 10 to 11 organizers doing something during the week instead of just 3 to 5, which is a lot better than 1 to 3 sometimes going on when we first started at any given time. There was a lot of us, but like I'm talking about like now we've got over 10 people on any given day on something sometimes. So, that's kind of cool. So that's everything that we've got going right now as a caucus. And the next section, I think that we really wanted to address the situation in the Gaza Strip and in Palestine in general, because there's been stuff. Thank you, Robin. Thanks a lot. And we hope to continue to grow throughout the state and be able to actually build up resources and stuff. But I think we're going to start, Ryan, if you'd like to sort of give a brief contextual history of the situation, and then from there we can talk about what's going on the ground in Palestine, and then we can eventually work our way to like fielding questions and stuff like that.
So, the whole region, it's about 100, maybe more years of a lot of just strife. Starting out, I'm going to discuss what Zionism is, because that really is what started all of this stuff. Zionism is the idea that the Jewish people deserve a homeland that is Jewish in culture, Jewish in religion, and it's very nationalist. And it was started in around 1896 by a man named Theodor Herzl. He is an Austrian-Hungarian Jew who experienced a lot of anti-Semitic actions, which was a very common thing back then in Europe as a whole. A lot of people might recognize the word pogroms. This was like way before like the Holocaust and anything. Just a lot of violence towards the Jewish people for just very silly things that people assumed about Jews. It caused Theodore to create this vision, not necessarily in Palestine, but somewhere for the Jewish people to call a home of their own, independent from any other states, so that they could escape the violence. As he passed this idea around, it gained a little bit of popularity. So it developed what they ended up calling the World Zionist Congress in about 1897. And what they determined in the first gathering of the Congress was that because Palestine was the original homeland of the Jewish people, that is where this new state should be. At first, this idea was kind of nebulous. It wasn't set in stone that Palestine was the region that they should go to. In fact, in the Sixth Zionist Conference, it was suggested that Uganda should be the place that they go to. But I want to say in the seventh, which took place about 1904, it was then solidified that Palestine was, in fact, going to be this place, this homeland. So with that idea formed, it was brought to the attention of the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. The British Empire being the largest empire in the world, it had a lot of resources that the Jewish people of the Zionist Conference wanted to utilize in order to make this happen. And the Ottomans, they had the territory under their purveyance, not really under their control. A lot of the Ottoman regions were somewhat semi-autonomous. But it was World War I that, with the British coming in, they needed an uprising in the Arabic regions in order to, get through Ottoman forces. And so they really drummed up these nationalist causes that were kind of only beginning to develop. For instance, the Palestinian identity didn't really develop until about 1911. But with the eventual British takeover of the region, the Zionist conference went to the empire, the British Empire, and really pushed to have the Jews allowed unfettered access to the region. The Palestinians that lived there a lot of their families had been there for over 2,000 years. In fact, I'd say a majority of them. So when these Jewish folks started being kind of pushed by European powers to move to the Palestinian region, it really was encouraged for the Palestinians to leave these regions or these like homes that they had lived in for thousands of years. But at that point, Tel Aviv, probably the largest city of Israel currently, was the first actual Israeli city to be formed after Zionism had begun. And really from there, we see a lot of instances of continued violence in Europe, continuing to push the Jewish population into this region, being essentially funneled into it by the British Empire as a means of solidifying their control in the mandate that they had. A mandate, for those that don't know, is sort of like a colony, but with a little more autonomy. The intent of a mandate is to develop them until they're independent, but it's the British Empire, so they had intentions of keeping it forever. But yeah, they pushed as much of the Jews in Europe into this region to essentially kick out the Arabs that were starting to cause problems for the British Empire. They didn't like that the Jews that were moving there before the British Empire encouraged them were coming. So what you see is a large Arabic revolt. Hold on. And that was about 1936, and it lasted for 3 years. It started off as a protest, similar to that of the George Floyd protest that happened in 2020. There was a murder by a British officer, and it really sparked these longstanding frustrations. And it continued to grow until the whole region was up in arms. And unfortunately, such a small region can't stop a whole empire. And it was put down. About 10% of the male Palestinian population was murdered. Several thousand Palestinians, and their homes were given to the Jews that were at that time trying to escape Nazi violence, which isn't inherently bad, but yeah, they at this point were replacing the inhabitants that were there. So in a sense, what we're seeing is a similar thing that happened when the European powers came to America. They would just shove the Native Americans off of their land and replace it with colonists. And at this point, it was a de facto colony. And by the end of World War II, the Holocaust really pushed a lot of Jews who had been on the fence about moving to go to Israel to escape any future retribution that they may face. And a lot of them had faced those old pogroms before the Holocaust, and then the Holocaust was wildly destructive to the community. So So many Jews were leaving for Israel that Britain actually stopped the flow of immigrants until eventually the mandate ended in 1948 with the independence of the state of Israel. That's about where I'm going to stop, because going from that point until now would probably take several hours.
Yeah, but essentially it's just a series of encroachments on the encampments. So once like a people who had like that multi-thousand year, multi-generational lineages tied to the land were slowly pushed into smaller and smaller settlements until like essentially we've got the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip right now is where a lot of the focus is, but I think that early on in the discussion, we need to like also clarify that there has been like bombing and military incursions in the West Bank as well right now, from IDF forces. And so one of the reasons that this came onto the national and international stage was because on October 7th, there was an uprising, and Hamas, it looks like, had broken. There's like, well, I mainly saw like them breaking open the settlement fences and going out and engaging in a military incursion. And so the Israeli government retaliated and has been continually escalating those retaliations. And like, yeah, a refugee camp got bombed 3 times. And if we want to run down the list of things like Shanoa or Ryan, do y'all want to take on kind of running over what like sort of the retaliations that have happened and the summary punishments that have been being done in the name of sort of like destroying Hamas?
Yeah. So the abuses so far have been just unfathomable. I cannot say that word. It's just, I can't believe that we are actually watching an actual genocide like play out right in front of us. So I get a lot of my news on the situation from some Palestinian news sources. So that includes Quds News Network and Resistance News Network on Telegram, and you can just Google that, and you can follow along too. But they are constantly streaming information as to what the Palestinians are going through like every single day. So I'll just start going down the list. So one thing that is just, it's certainly a human rights abuse is Israel has cut off access to water and power, and barely allowing any sort of aid to get through to the area. So when you think about it, so there's a whole bunch of people who are, so from North Gaza, they're trying to get down to southern Gaza, like Israel's telling them to, but you have a whole bunch of people in very close proximity, and they don't have water and food or power. So you can think about the kinds of diseases that are starting to spread through now. And that's not even considering people with injuries from the constant bombardment as well. Another thing that needs to be brought up is the use of white phosphorus on these people. So white phosphorus will burn all the way down to the bone. It's just absolutely inhumane. It's actually banned by the United Nations as well. So it's just even thinking about it is just really getting me emotional, because I can't believe these.
They've been firing that as a marker since before the incursion. So what they do, they'll launch white phosphorus at a hospital, whatever, a building, a tenement, a mosque, or whatever it is, and we've got a list that we can run down. But they'll do that, and they're saying that they're marking the place. But yeah, the white phosphorus is something that if it lands and gets in your skin, you have to neutralize it and extract it because it'll sink all the way to the bone and cause liver failure. And half of the population is under the age of 18.
Yep.
So like this is, yeah, it's a war crime. It's against Geneva conventions, but like, so are a lot of the armaments. There was a video posted on Twitter yesterday of an Apache helicopter carrying an illegal round. And I forgot exactly what that munition was, but it's happening left and right. And like the officers and the IDF will post pictures and videos, and then it'll be taken off out. It'll be caught onto by press, and then they'll go deny it. But you can continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. Oh no, you're good. So it's hard to keep a running tally of how many people have been killed and injured, because they're constantly under bombardment or under attack. And so with that, if we could get the graphic up with the most recent, well, it's not the most recent, but like as of yesterday. So almost 10,000 people killed with over 25,000 people injured. That has certainly changed. I think it's most definitely over 10,000 now that have been killed.
Yeah, there were 1,500 deaths yesterday. And before yesterday, and when this came out, approximately 7,000 of those dead are women and children. And there's been very little to zero reported IDF fatalities, even though there have been a few, because they've been like being repelled in the military incursions that they've been going in.
Mm-hmm. And because they're just under constant bombardment, and like EMT workers are being attacked, and people who are trying to pull injured people out of the rubble, they're being attacked. So there are just bodies that are just laying around, and that one graphic was saying that dogs are eating the bodies because they just can't. Yeah, dead bodies are lying on roadsides on the outskirts of Gaza City, being eaten by dogs, just because they don't have the manpower to gather all the bodies up, especially when they're still under constant bombardment.
And there has been an ongoing relationship between the U.S. and Israel prior to this. They were giving, $3 billion in annual aid for munitions, some of which is produced in Arkansas. I was just referencing a comment over here that William had posted, how the IDF trains U.S. law enforcement and vice versa. So we have a close conversation. We have a close relationship around this, and like the latest infusions have just been to kind of help fund and equip the IDF forces for this escalation. Yeah, hospitals are being targeted. We've got a small list, but a lot of these are, they've like the first Al-Quds one, they told people that they were going to bomb it, and then they did, and then denied it, and then the United States media reinforced that it was a Hamas bomb. It's actually that happened, but we've got a long list of other ones.
Yeah, and there was a children's hospital that was hit. Was it yesterday? The third floor was actually a cancer wing, so it treated children with cancer. It's awful. It's awful.
Justification, they've been saying that it's because there are underground tunnels, or that there are agents treating people as human shields. But like, if anybody else were, if any individual terrorist general or whatever were to be found out that they were in a hospital, we're usually not bomb the hospital. Like, they were told to evacuate, and they were told to head south, and then there's only one exit. North is into Iraq, or I mean into Israel. Sorry, north is into Israel. Like west is into the sea, where the fishing boats are being blown up. They're like targeting civilian vehicles like their military. And because I think partially because Hamas was a party that was elected, that was actually supported by the right wing in the U.S. and Israeli government, the same as Al-Qaeda was in the 1980s. Al-Qaeda was an organization that was formed of mainly Saudis, actually, in Afghanistan, who we gave $127 or so million a year to kick the Soviets out of Afghanistan, and Al Qaeda eventually became they weren't Al Qaeda at the time, they were the Mujahideen, and the Mujahideen became Al Qaeda, became the Taliban. And so this is like part and parcel with like the really neo-imperialist like doctrine that we followed. and it's something that as abolitionists we have to be mindful of. But yeah, the multiple hospitals, Al Quds, Al Shifa Baptist Hospital, the Arab National Hospital, Indonesian Hospital, the Al Ahi Hospital, the Al Mamadani Hospital, the Kamal Adwan Hospital, like, and also a lot of these have dwindling power, dwindling fuel. They'll have to go to groups like Hamas in order to get fuel because all the cargo coming in from Egypt is being blocked out. And when the UN has called for a ceasefire, like the United States ambassador was the one dissenting opinion. And they were going to call for a temporary ceasefire to let all of these medical supplies and fuel come in. But they want complete obliteration. Over 80% of structures are destroyed, over 50% completely and totally bulldozed right now. And the only exit where they sent people to, they bombed shortly thereafter. The IDF forces bombed the southern exits going into Egypt. And so now there's been like a little bit of fluctuation. The news has changed a little bit, and Ryan can kind of bring us up on this. But originally they were trying to push all of the Palestinian people off of their lands and into Egypt to live in the desert. But Egypt is like, no, we can't host a permanent settlement. And so essentially, Ryan, I guess you can kind of talk about what was brought up today.
So at a conference today, Netanyahu explicitly stated that the goal of post-war Gaza is to have an indefinite occupation by the Israeli government. In the past, what this has meant is a total takeover and population replacement.
So yeah, so they're intending for it to be a permanent occupation or like a sub-colony. And before it was essentially like it's a concentration camp now as it is. In the West Bank, they have specific roads that Palestinians cannot travel on. You have to, there's checkpoints throughout. You have to get your papers checked. Like the biggest employer in Palestine since before this incursion was foreign aid. Like more than half of the people were not getting adequate nutrition, like on the daily before this happened, before they cut transport, before they cut power infrastructure. And not only has power infrastructure and digital information infrastructure been interrupted, but they've also been blowing up solar arrays in any other ways. And another thing, back to the hospital, there's been a couple pictures that were posted where a couple of engineers have come back and refuted, where they were like, see, this is a tunnel entrance. And they're like, no, that's actually a fuel storage cistern. And they sent pictures of it because it was a little concrete square with a little riser, which was essentially the riser was the ventilation system for their underground fuel storage, which they saw as like a tunnel entrance by the hospital and used it to target. So yeah, and it's pretty objectionable, and it's not hard to argue against ethnic cleansing. You might think that you don't have all the information, but like really on principle, like forcing peoples who have lived there for thousands of years off their land so they could have settler colonialists come in is objectionable. And it needs to be resisted in any way. I know in Little Rock and in Fayetteville, at least, they're having regular protests. They're having larger protests than have happened for anything. Like in DC, they had a massive one. And there's slight progress, but it's so frustrating. Like Joe Biden was enthusiastically about it, and now he's starting to backpedal and ask for at least a temporary strategic ceasefire. So that's a big move, but that's also atrocious because essentially like and there's people like in boats, like a lot of native people in the Northwest are blockading weapons transport boats. And at multiple ports across the United States, the weapons transport ships have been being blocked so that these like probably white phosphorus rounds produced in Arkansas and other armaments and weapons can't make it out there to intensify the killing. because essentially we're in another quagmire. They're creating a situation where they are they're building the groundwork for a guerrilla war and a resistance. So if Hamas wasn't a problem before, now that people are dying in the streets en masse with no protection other than them, it's definitely going to help build for them. So essentially it's going to turn into a continually nastier thing until the president or until the prime minister of Israel backs out and at least like recognizes the former boundaries, right? Like, I mean, it would be best if there could be some sort of like integration or solid two-state solution, but right now it's like all the world is asking is for them to stop bulldozing and murdering people.
Now, there are, if you can call them positive developments. Before this happened on October 7th, Israel had done a mass campaign to normalize relations with other Arab states. I want to say just about every nation outside of the UAE where they were doing this, it has completely stopped. And a lot of those nations have had a total reverse on that course. The biggest one is Saudi Arabia. And that one is huge because the events that took place after October 7th has caused Saudi Arabia and Iran, which are traditional enemies, to actually come together and have a joint discussion for the first time since the revolution in the 70s in Iran. And it was a huge moment that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Yemen is currently in the middle of a civil war, and that has been put on temporary hold. The civil war had been instigated by both Iran and Saudi Arabia.
And that's a situation also where U.S. forces went in and were refueling Saudi bombers to go out and carpet bomb Yemeni civilians. So this, like, the genocide isn't new, and I think that it deserves outrage. But like, we also need to be aware of the fact that this is something that's been continual, and it's good that there's a ceasefire with that now, and I guess that the Middle East is getting together. But also, it's because the United States, since the 1970s, has been like kind of slipping in its position as a global world hegemon. And in like a lot of the ways that we grow is to go out, like the economy has to expand, and the throughput of industrial production has to grow every year no matter what, or the system itself dies. And so usually we stimulate new growth, kind of like what we did in the 90s, where Bill Clinton passed NAFTA, which deregulated labor and environmental laws, and we were able to go in, dump produce on the commodity markets in South and Central America and Mexico, devalue the price of the products, bankrupt all of the small farmers, buy up all the property and set up maquiladoras and sweatshops. And then also we had like free trade zones essentially in Southeast Asia where we've done that. But the problem is those areas in the global South is shrinking. And so we tried with Iraq, and right now even Ukraine, and we can talk about this subject later in the future, is like got a massive like natural gas and renewable energy or place. They're like the Saudi Arabia of Eastern Europe. And they were somebody that NATO has always promised to not bring on because of the need for a buffer zone between Russia and Eastern Europe. But that's a different conversation. But I'm just kind of contextualizing the whole situation where Saudi Arabia was one of our major allies. It's like Saudi Arabia and Israel where we had our soft power in the Middle East. And so since Saudi Arabia has kind of pivoted and is opposing this genocide, we've got a situation where those former opponents are allied, but also places like North Korea and stuff who are already also expressing solidarity and sending equipment to the former colonial nations of Africa are joining the table. So we're seeing an uprise of the former nations that had like their revolutions and cultural revolutions in the middle part of the 20th century, now who've become world powers, who are kind of trying to step around and support. So that's one of the reasons why we're so slow to seize our support. And also, the parties are really tone deaf. I think that even the Biden administration just assumed that we would have this hardline pro-Israeli stance when we can see it happening now every day. We could just get on now. You can go on to friggin' Snapchat Live onto the maps and just go look at live footage from what's going on like right now at the moment. So, and this is something that has to be opposed. Boycotts. Does anybody have info on that?
Yeah, so there are some big boycotts going on right now for companies who donate directly to Israel. So the three big ones include McDonald's, Starbucks, and Disney. So we all need to come together and just stop giving our money to these companies because hitting them in the wallet, that's really going to send a message. So if we can at the very least boycott these three companies, McDonald's, Starbucks, Disney, we can actually make some effective change.
That's the big three unions. I know you can go over the list too, but also we need to talk to the AFL workers and the Teamsters and people like that to push them to support blockades and push for work stoppages. So there's that overlap where Starbucks has been horribly mistreating their workers and denying them the right to organize. And also they are complicit with a lot of this stuff. So, and have vested interest in it. So there's sort of a double reason. So if you're going to give money for Starbucks, put it towards the Starbucks Workers United Strike Fund. But anyway, sorry. I'll let you continue.
Well, that's also, you bring up a good point, because you could also take the money you would go to Starbucks on and actually put it into your community. Go to a local coffee shop. Like here in Jonesboro, we have Story Coffee. We could just go there instead. There's some others as well. So pretty much any big pizza chain, unfortunately. So like Domino's, Papa John's, Pizza Hut. Try to stay away from those as well. Go to your local pizzerias.
Just hit me up. I'm spinning out pizzas all the time in my kitchen.
That looks good.
Yeah, it was good. Still is. So I guess we're over an hour, but if anybody has questions or anything, should we open up? I know we've got about 9 people on still, including us. Yeah, it keeps the money within the community. There's multipliers. Whenever you spend money anywhere, that's why even with the food desert thing, we're trying to make sure that if we could prioritize at least the business owners who live in the community to develop the infrastructure, that'd be cool, because it leaves a massive multiplier effect. One of the early things that I've worked on in my organizing life was the idea of building land trusts and worker cooperatives. Because you could set up land trusts that even if the businesses are privately owned, the community decides what they want to have there. And then if the person who owns the business tries to move off site and just profit from it and funnel the money off to some suburb or white flight community, then they see open managing ownership of it. So, but yeah, definitely it's a multiplier effect to shop small, and it helps build real culture instead of feeding the weird corporate monoculture that we're under. Brian, do you have any last thoughts?
Well, so we actually have elections going on today across the nation. There's a lot of states that have off-year elections. One of those is Kentucky, which is the big one there is the governor election. And as of right now, with about 83% of the votes reporting, Andy Bashar, the Democrat, has won election and maintained his seat. That was one that the Republicans put a lot of money into, and the candidate just he was very Trumpish, I'll say, and it just didn't work out for him. Some of the other ones coming out of Ohio, it looks like they have officially codified the right to an abortion. So not only is it legal, it is illegal to make it illegal. As of right now, marijuana is looking to be legalized. So that is also a big one for Ohio. We have the Virginia legislature. That one is still up in the air. What they are looking for is currently the Democrats hold the House. They are looking to, or sorry, they hold the Senate, and they are looking to regain the House. They have Governor Youngkin, who is very much like DeSantis, but right now, because he doesn't have all three chambers like DeSantis has, he can't ban abortion. He can't do the whole anti-woke agenda or whatever it is that they call it now. So yeah, as you can see on the screen, it's looking pretty good for the Democrats. As you can tell there with the Mississippi governor race, Jackson, which is the major Democratic point, is still not reporting. So don't get your hopes up yet, folks. And then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is a big one. If I'm not mistaken, they had a slim majority in the Supreme Court. So the McCaffrey winning is going to be big for them. There's also some local elections in New York and Colorado, but that's less consequential to us here in Arkansas. Really, the two biggest ones are Ohio. It really highlights the fact that abortion is still a huge issue to not only Democrats. It is something that everybody can continue to put pressure on. And it is something that candidates can and should be running on.
It's one of those things that is essentially splitting the Republican base. This one's not as virulent in doing it, but there are a lot of libertarian-leaning Republicans and even like social conservatives who don't personally promote abortion, who really strongly oppose the fact the government is legislating the reproductive systems of people. And so there's that with that. And there's been a lot of blowback around that. Like a lot of these quote unquote culture war things, like even Republicans are tired of. But and a lot of them, they sound good. They look like attractive things on the front end until they enact them. You can see that with like the prison expansions here. Like we had a new legislative omnibus bill that pretty much like is going to explode our prison population and also reprioritize small offenses to where we can keep more people in prison for longer. Thanks a lot, William, by the way, and we're going to try and get in touch with you. Hopefully we can meet up this weekend or something. But yeah, the abortion thing is something that we can try and run on. It's been something that's been difficult to get liberal organizations around Arkansas to really unify on right now. We tried to start like the Little Rock Grace Act, but after being told that it would be impossible by a couple quote unquote experts, like a lot of the people backed down. And we also tried to initiate a couple like abortion initiative talks. I think that David Couch is currently claims to be drafting an abortion referendum and may or may not have filed it with the state. We can double check that, but I have no idea what that looks like. So that's something that we should all think about working on and fighting. And we can do that in multiple levels and in multiple jurisdictions. That's something that we need to not forget. Like back to like the felon voting bill. If we get a voter initiative in Washington County over that, and then Celine and like Craighead or others like push it within their own quorum courts. There's a possibility that we could build legal precedents to go around and either pressure the legislature, even if it's like primarily Republican, to pass it, or just to continue doing that until we break the Republican supermajority. So even if it's like county by county, city by city, there's ways we can push for effective legislative wins. And I know earlier in the thing, there was that comment saying that we'd be willing to work across the aisle. Like we had Republicans and Democrats and independents and Greens and Democratic Socialists and Christian conservatives all working together to try and beat the Learns Act. And I can guarantee you we're going to have Republicans and Democrats and Democratic Socialists and Libertarians and Christian fundamentalists and every sort of SWAT like type of person pushing on like a value added producer grant or some farm bill type stuff or something like that in Arkansas. There's ways we can legislate progressive legislation and progressive values that don't alienate people and that we don't have to go rightward.
So we are about 15 minutes over. What we have on screen here is that donate link. Y'all, this has been a lot more fun than I was expecting. I believe we are planning to do this bi-weekly. Is that, or every 2 weeks? Is that?
Yeah, we can do it bi-weekly. We'll try. We're wanting other people, other members. Hey, you can be a member for free, or you can donate, and you could be us hosting this next time. Maybe we could sit over and, you know, enjoy the show that y'all put on. You should consider it.
Not every one of our second segments is going to be as upsetting. I don't actually know if we have one set for next go around, but we'll get that information thrown out on the social medias as we come about it. My name is Ryan Gilio.
My name is Kenneth Leon Grand III from Coy, Arkansas.
I am Shanoa Summers, and I am a purple-headed freak.
And we're about time to clock off on this Southern shift.
That's right. All right, see you guys next time.
Thank y'all.